Good evening, and welcome to Taking the Initiative. I'm Reverend Bill Kunze, your host for these conversations with people who are making a difference in our communities. I'm the senior pastor of Christ Church, United Church of Christ congregation in historic Bethlehem, there to lead people to know Christ and to serve in Christ's name. You know, there are few issues of more importance to all of us and to all of our communities and to our nation than public education. Everybody knows that it must be changed, reformed, but it's a daunting task. And I think one of the most difficult tasks in our region today is to be a superintendent of an urban school district. After these short messages, I'll be talking with one of the most prominent educators in the state, in fact, in our nation, about these very issues, so stay tuned. Welcome back. On July 1st, 2010, Dr. Gerald Zahorchak has become the superintendent of the Allentown School District with a doctoral degree in education administration from Pennsylvania State University, a long and nationally recognized career, most recently as the Secretary of Education of the state of Pennsylvania. Dr. Zahorchak brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the challenges of leading the third largest school district in the Commonwealth. Welcome to Taking the Initiative.
Thanks very much. I'm so happy to be here.
You know, you come from a high office in the state of leading education in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I wonder if you had sort of, to set the context of talking about your new position, of what you accomplished there in your leadership of the state.
Well, one thing, we wanted more kids to be ready for education that's necessary to go away from high school and into post-secondary systems, both college or career and technical preparation or others. And we measure that by the fundamentals. Do kids read well? Do they do mathematics well? Can they do inquiry science well? And what we were able to do in that regard, when we arrived, a little less than 50% of our kids could show on grade level abilities. And when we left, about 80% of our kids could.
Across the state?
Across the Commonwealth, and we have 1.8 million students in the Commonwealth going to 500 school districts. So that was one system that we did. We also did preparation and continuing education by looking at the systems that prepare our teachers and that continue their education for school teachers and principals and others. And we were able to construct significant systems changes so that there's a lot more alignment with the work at hand, so that the teachers' early experiences are aligned with getting hired for a job and then continuing their education, and same thing with principals. And then the third thing we did was follow the Lehigh Valley's lead and ask the question, what does it take really to have an adequate education in terms of the investments? Does it take more money for children who are impoverished or low-income families? Does it take more money for children who are English language learners? And we were able to follow the legislature's lead when they conducted a statewide study based on the study that was done first in the Lehigh Valley and create a funding system, although not perfect, a great improvement on past efforts to ensure adequacy and then equity in terms of the distribution of limited resources from the state. So in those three areas, we accomplished a great deal. We also accomplished a great deal in early childhood education. We went from a state that was offering $0 in investment of state funds in birth through school age 5, to a state that was recognized by the leading educational newspaper, Ed Week, in America, as their Quality Counts report listed Pennsylvania as the #1 state most improved in early childhood educational efforts. And delighted to say once again, a lot of that leadership came.
Now, after all those accomplishments, in that realm, you've kind of come to the trenches, if you will. You have come to the Allentown School District, a large district, but one with a large, a third of the students don't graduate, with some large problems to deal with. People who aren't up to standards in testing and so on. So, well, what are your goals that you're bringing into this task?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing who's here. We have a student body here that's not unlike students anywhere in the world. These are kids that come eager and ready to learn and come to systems. And we have teachers here that are as good as or better than educators across America. And if we look at those two groups and say, look, they're going to work together, there's where the capacity needs to be built. Can we build systems, sensible systems that help provide students with clear understanding of what the goals are, and teachers, help give information and data back to teachers and students, and then intuitive tools that would help give supports for kids in the classroom and then kids in remediation. I think it's that kind of approach that we have as one systems-changing set of goals. But clearly, we have indicators that we want to measure, like dropout. Last year, we lost 530 students. So that means every 4 years, you lose 2,000 plus students that will enter a job market from 18 to 64, where the city has 1 out of every 3 citizens in that age range without a high school diploma. So that's a number we want to increase, and we have a definite mark. We want to increase it by 10% a year. So this year we want to have 53 less. We also say, what about the top end of the student class leaving our high schools? We can now benchmark across the country, across the state, on how many kids are earning college credits while still in high school. And we have lots of places right here in our Commonwealth that we can point to saying the vast majority of kids leave with 9 credits. But some kids leave with an associate degree on high school graduation night. We'll also look at how many kids are taking advanced placement courses and the tests that go along with them, the examination system that goes along with them, and scoring at an acceptable, on a scale of 1 to 5 in College Board language. If they score at 3, then that's a passing. So how many people are actually taking the courses? We want to improve that number. And for each of these things, we have definite numbers that we want to hit. All of our buildings have definite percentage numbers for every year that we say the number of kids reading on grade level, the number of kids reading, doing mathematics on grade level, the number of kids doing science on grade level. Here's the numbers. So when we start to have conversations from the numbers and goals backwards, then we start strategically planning systems changes that will help people do that work. I see our job, my job, as being a support of, first of all, the most important function of the school, support of the teachers.
Now, you mentioned system changes, and well, as a pastor trying to revitalize a large congregation, I know personally that change is not easy to introduce into institutions, and boy, when we look at some of your colleagues across the country who have been reform-minded, change-minded, some of them have hit the wall. They're Rhee in Washington, D.C., and Klein in New York City, and so on. It seems like, and have you not already, in fact, with some of your initiatives, found places where there are barriers to change? How do you see massaging that to be able to move ahead?
That's a wonderful question. And I think when you look at Jewel Klein or Michelle Reeves or in Pittsburgh, Mark Roosevelt, or in Philadelphia, Arlene Ackerman, these are all reform agency and urban systems that are doing significant work to change. Leadership styles are different among that group. Some are very directive, and maybe in some cases directive is what's needed. It's situational. I won't have opinion because, a glass person is not going to throw many stones at the leadership styles of another person. Nonetheless, I think it's very, very important to come into change with a demonstrated vision that people can see and help them see the destination. And if people can see that destination, and then you take time with them to ask each individual hundreds of hours of saying, Tell me what you believe the strengths and weaknesses, the approach you'd use to getting to this framework or these targets, and let the system, which is ultimately responsible for the new or reaching new goals in change systems, let the system start to inform the kind of strategies that are necessary to actually get to those goals. So that entry for 6 months. But just like in Good to Great, the studies that have been done on these absolute phenomenal organizations, because it's not about a person, it's about phenomenal organizations. One thing you'll notice is the organization will set goals, have a vision, and then stay on course towards that vision while knowing that they're going to take on some tough waves. So if this were a sailing craft going towards an island, you know the destination, you've tracked a course, but things will happen. Currents will change, winds will change, you'll have to fight the elements. And in Good to Great, they use the analogy of the hedgehog going towards food, saying, look, when these things do happen, just hunker down, make tactical changes perhaps, but get inside that shell, wait, and then continuously proceed towards those goals and outcomes that you desire.
Certainly one of the waves that you'll be encountering is, gosh, the poverty rate in Allentown is something like 24, 25%. That probably means up to 40% of the children are growing up in low-income households with a variety of social problems. And I have some acquaintance with the man in Allentown School District that leads your outreach to homeless children. You have homeless children in the system. It seems like they bring a batch of problems that are hard to address in the educational arena. Sort of, how do you see those social problems impacting what you need to do educationally?
Greatly. There's no doubt about it. We're blessed to be in a community that has outreach for our neglected and homeless. We're blessed to have so many providers from the faith-based groups to nonprofit agencies, for-profit agencies, so many people on the second circle, if you will, actually saying we're ready to go. We want to, as part of our mission, is to help other people. So that's an amazing grace, if you will. We're blessed with that. And I think when you talked moments ago about poverty numbers, 25 or whatever that number is now, we think it's now 29%.
Yeah.
But that's dire poverty. That's as poor gets, that number. And then you suggested low income. On top of that number is 8.5 out of 10 children are in low income families. The good news is there are plenty of examples of places where the same population types have been, the outcomes have been very, very positive. We talk about 90% poverty, 90% minority, yet 90% on grade level in many places around the country. We need to focus on what is it that the school can control, give us less anxiety, while organizing helpers. But what can we control? And we know by a variable of factor of 7 related to family background and 14 related to things like class size, we can actually do a lot when there's effective capacity built within our classrooms. And that's a job of the supporters for teachers. How can we help our teachers build that capacity?
And we need to take a break now and then come back and hear about some of the specific initiatives you're launching to address the issues in the Allentown School District. So stay tuned, a lot more to come. Those are children from the Allentown School District, and I want to welcome you back to Taking the Initiative. I'm Reverend Bill Kunze. We're talking about public education, and my guest is Dr. Gerald Zahorchak, the new superintendent of the Allentown School District. You were talking about putting a number of things in place. How do you maintain accountability around moving up those test scores, around changing things in the system?
Yeah, I'd like to have a conversation in this community that's not going on in the country and ask the question, are you holding your superintendent really accountable? Do you know annually? Is that transparent for people to see? Do you know the numbers of children you want to move to grade level? And is the superintendent taking some accountability for that? Do you know the number of kids you want to graduate, the number of kids you want in these AP courses? Does the superintendent do his job normally with facilities and fiscal management and professional development of staff and beyond? Make that transparent and really say to the people, look, if your superintendent doesn't do the job, remove the superintendent. Make that person accountable for getting the job done. So you have to have a superintendent who is of fairly good acumen with regard to the work, is able to help move people and work with people and not be a teller as much as a team member going towards goals. So again, you have to make sure the accountability starts at the top. And then systems for accountability that need to change. We're looking now at results indexes for our principals and administrators that results, those kinds of things that I called out, graduation, attendance, grades of students, et cetera. And then we're saying, are they taking care of their own professional development? And then can we examine them the way we traditionally do in the kind of across-the-table evaluation of all elements of leadership and the work? And combining those three, we have proposed a new evaluation system, one that, by the way, is already getting the attention of the national community that's talking about this subject. This is new territory for the education systems to have a really differentiated accountability system that includes performance of students. And I think we're going to be able to do that. We're working with the Gates Foundation Initiative in Pennsylvania with 5 other school districts to think about those kind of elements at the teacher level. So the cascading accountability system, if you have something that counts and you know what it is, and you can then be accountable for those things. So first of all, being very clear on what counts, counting it, make sure people are held accountable to get to the performances that your system so desperately needs. And then help develop people along the way so they can always make the mark.
Now, I'm one of those old-fashioned characters that worries about when we build in all these systems of people teaching for tests. You've heard this, and I'm sure you've thought about it before, rather than, say, creative thinking, which really is the genius that is needed in our economy and in our world. I guess, how do you balance that out so we don't end up with teachers helping people master that next test that's coming down the way for their students instead of sort of content and creative thought?
Yeah, I think when we compare our assessment systems to the international set, we can learn a lot from benchmarking some of the other countries when they're trying to build in. I think the two things are complementary and both can be assessed. I think we can assess 21st century skills, your ability to get along, your ability to be creative, et cetera, with, can you do math? And so when you ask me in the fundamental areas, can I assess whether or not a child can do things like Algebra 2, I have to know from an international benchmark, what is Algebra 2? And is Algebra 2 standardized enough that no matter where you go as a student, you can rely on it being Algebra 2? Not some version of it or not some piece of it, but Algebra 2. And are there measures that we can have both during the year and in some final examination, the student can do the math? Like it or not, that assessment system has to exist. We have to know, were you able to teach kids to do the math? And how do we compare to other countries? So teaching to the test, in my view, would be wrong if I give the teacher the test and say, these will be the questions, now just teach the answers to this. But if you're teaching mathematics, and mathematics is going to be assessed with which it necessarily has to be assessed, then I think there's nothing wrong with an assessment system, and also grading schools and districts and people on whether or not they're helping get kids to be able to do the fundamentals. While we were sleeping in the last few decades, since the 1940s, the eastern side of the world has made extraordinarily huge investments in their education system, huge advancements in the outcomes. And now when we do the international comparisons and all myths about them being different aside, we have plenty of work to get at as a nation, and plenty of work right here in Allentown. If we're going to be economically viable, our kids have to be ready to go. That's what you're paying $250 million annually right here in one city to say, can we get that done? And I'm betting on we can.
And what are some of the new initiatives that you are launching to get that done?
Well, I'm hoping to make sure people understand, as Lehigh Valley has understood. This starts at birth. With a child in low-income situations or in poverty, they'll hear 33 million less word utterances by the end of age 3. So we talk about achievement gaps. That's where it begins. We have to set up the brain to be active with language and numbers. And we have to also make sure that we can use programs that work, like the nurse-family partnership. When in low-income families, nurses visit the house for health reasons.
Yes.
Why not carry the literacy stuff in that visit? Nurse-family partnership does just that. Then I love Lehigh Valley because it's saying their leaders here, business community, is saying we want to make sure there is universal access to a high-quality 3- and 4-year-old program, at least 1 year of access for every child. Recently, we studied that. About 1 out of every 3 children here get access in the Lehigh Valley to a high-quality preschool program, essential. And then a good early childhood program. We're working on interventions so that no one leaves first grade without being second grade ready, a key. That means using our friends after school and using our friends and systems in the summer, but also helping our friends align their efforts towards our efforts so that a child really becomes a great reader and understands mathematics before going to second grade. Building the warning systems in the middle school so that when a child's absent, not behaving well, not doing homework, or not achieving, signals at points and efforts, interventions, visiting the home, getting the parents, getting friends, getting caregivers, making sure the child's in school and being supported while in school, and then making high school more personal, more rigorous in terms of we're expecting, something out of you before you get out, but count on us, we're staying with you, and making it relevant. You can have college credits before leaving here, that's relevant. Or you can have a trade experience that gets you a credential, that's relevant. Or you can have an internship that actually gets you a job, that's relevant. So those kind of things together make systems changes for us.
What's the Allentown Promise?
The Allentown Promise is following up on a city in Michigan called Kalamazoo. And in Kalamazoo, 80,000 people, 20,000 less than Allentown. Everybody was leaving. The auto industry, similar to Mack Truck, left, and people were exiting. And they thought, how do we bring people back? Homeowners buying homes. They invested millions of dollars. They're giving kids a promise of a scholarship, all loans paid. You carry no loans out of your post-secondary education if you do well in our high school. We'd love to do that here in Allentown. Most recently, a second city, New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University said they're doing it. Those two cities have proof of concept, especially Kalamazoo. Home values went up, the achievement went up, and the number of kids going to college went way up. Things are looking good in Kalamazoo, a place where you'd say, no way this could flip. As an economic development strategy, the promise is huge.
And you bring that promise to Allentown. We congratulate you on your position and look forward to your great achievements there. Thanks for your time with us this evening.
Thanks. It went quickly. This was nice. Thanks.
And thank you for tuning in. We'll be same time next week. See you then.